We are at the beginning of our fourth academic year. This has been intense years, and as a consequence, we now have to be regarded, for better or for worse, as a consolidated institution. This is an institution that has learned a lot. It has also learned that when we started, it knew about this business less than it thought.
It's a real pleasure for me to speak here today. I was very fortunate in my graduate studies. I learned about microtheory from Andreu Mas-Colell and from Jerry Green. I was fortunate and I was elected a member or a fellow of the Econometric Society. Andreu sent me a letter and he wrote, I quote, "I congratulate myself for your success." Well, I congratulate Andreu, the rectors and faculty members here, for your success in creating the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics. My graduate training in economics enabled me to both become a researcher and to give advice to policymakers. I'll talk about my recent role in policymaking today. From February 2009 until 2 weeks ago, November 6th, I was the Assistant Secretary for Economic Policy and Chief Economist of the U.S. Treasury Department. Now, I have to say, this is a job I never thought I would be offered and also didn't expect that I would take. But Tim Geithner called me up, Secretary Geithner called me on Christmas in 2008 and asked if I would come to Washington. And given the worldwide economic crisis at that point, I couldn't possibly say no. So here are the 6 lessons that I learned. First lesson is that we need all kinds of economics. I very much feel that one can't be doctrinaire in economics. It's too important. The lessons we have from all different branches of economics for policymakers are too important for us to be doctrinaire about particular fields. Second lesson, the level of detail that policymakers need to go into, or advisors to policymakers need to go into, is much beyond what academic economists are accustomed to. And this disconnect sometimes raises problems. More a problem for the policymakers than for the academics. We had a saying in the government about this. We were going deep into the weeds, really drilling down. Third lesson for me was that much of economic policy is tax policy. Even if you look at the stimulus bill, the largest component of the Recovery Act was tax cuts. So it was fortunate for me that I had studied public finance. I also realized that the way we teach public finance ignores a very important constraint. In practice, the constraint is this: revenue raised from one sector, from one area, is typically spent on that same area. I can give you lots of examples about this. I was at a meeting on healthcare reform when a cabinet official, very smart cabinet official, said, "I hope we pay for expanded healthcare from within the healthcare system." There are lots of other examples. In fact, I call this the systems approach to public finance. Too much attention is paid to new legislation and not enough to getting the older programs to work well. All of the excitement, at least that I saw, was around passing new legislation. And when I say older legislation might mean something that passed 2 months ago. The HIRE Act, which is the legislation that passed that gave companies a tax cut for hiring new workers, after it passed, the president hardly mentioned it. And to me, it was a shame because it was one of the tools we had to try to encourage job growth, to try to change the conversation away from layoffs and towards hiring. So in my office, we decided to put together a monthly report where we calculated how many workers were hired who were eligible to draw some attention to this policy. And I think the problem is that the president and the administration doesn't get enough credit for being a competent manager. Instead, the president's remembered for major legislative accomplishments and for world events that happen on his or her watch, or his watch, that the president can take credit for. Our legislative system does best in a crisis. And I'll use to illustrate this the TARP program. The TARP program is the program that was used to inject capital into banks, also was used to save Chrysler and General Motors, and in my view, rescued the financial system. The TARP program has been remarkably successful, and I have to say I'm rather surprised that TARP was as successful as it was. And one of the reasons why TARP was successful is that combining TARP with the stress tests, which were implemented very quickly by May of 2009, there was a roadmap for the financial institutions to pay the TARP money back and fill their capital needs with private investment. And I think that's one of the reasons why the US financial system stabilized so quickly and at surprisingly low cost to taxpayers. However, one thing I learned from this, and I think politicians will learn this much better than me, hard things are only done, difficult votes are only taken when it's forced upon them. There's very little capacity to think ahead and to plan ahead and to do difficult things before they're forced to do them. We like to say with TARP, we saved the economy but lost the country. And I think in a very real sense that's what happened, that the administration lost a lot of credibility with the public who thought we were not on their side, even though the actions we were taken to try to support the economy rather than rescue particular financial institutions. Let me end with my last lesson, lesson number 6, is I regret to report that there is no natural constituency for good economic policy. And why do I say that? Well, a lot of good economic policy should alter people and businesses' behavior on the margins, should get them to change what they're doing. The reason why this is good economic policy is you don't want to waste resources in achieving an outcome that's going to be achieved anyway. You want to have the biggest bang for the buck. And it's very useful to ask whether a particular policy is going to affect people who are marginal or inframarginal. Is it inframarginal? They would have responded the same way anyway. Now, the constituency groups, the interest groups, want to be rewarded for something they're going to do anyway. They're seeking rents. They're not so interested in having their marginal behavior rewarded. They'd like rewards for something they're doing already. So to develop a constituency for good policy requires an educated electorate and well-trained economists to get the message out. One of the things I learned is that a lot of the role of an economic advisor in policymaking is actually education. Educating the cabinet ministers or the heads of the various programs that actually administer the programs what seems to be the right economic approach. And I have to say that's why I'm very pleased to speak with you today. Your studies and your research will help prepare you to contribute to better economic policies. These policies are very unlikely to be put in place without the active involvement of economists. So I wish you all the best in your studies this year and in the future. Thank you.
I give the floor to José Manuel Campa, Secretario de Estado de Economía, Secretary of State for Economy in the Spanish government.
Basically, I'd like to highlight 3 ideas that were more or less put forward by Alan Krueger. And the first one of that idea is the importance of human capital, which I think is particularly important in this context. One of the things that's surprising to me when I look at partial equilibrium, which is what I do most of the time, is when I look at the studies by Krueger, Katz, other people that have looked at the returns to education, it's hard to think that we're really in equilibrium, because the apparent marginal returns to education, they may be decreasing at the micro level, but certainly, and when you're in grad school, believe me, you think that not only decreasing, they're likely to be negative many times. But at the aggregate level, somehow, the social returns to education are clearly very, very high from all estimates that we have. And marginally, from an economy like the Spanish economy and some other economies that have currently in the process of unwinding certain disequilibria from excessive investment in certain parts of the economy, it's certainly the case that the marginal returns to education are way above the marginal returns of other activities in the economy. And that more investment in education is certainly from the policy point of view the right strategy, and certainly from the economic point of view, I would say unquestionable, the strategy to pursue. The second idea that I think is very important is the importance of, when you go into policies, I think Alan Krueger said something like, our legislative process works at its best during the crisis. I don't know if that's true of the US legislative process. I don't know if that's a virtue of the legislative process, but one thing that I learned for sure is the concept of opportunity in policymaking. You know, that the opportunity, the window of opportunity is there, and it's not always there. You know, it could be there sometimes, it could not be there other times, you know, and the real ability, I think, of politicians to be able to clearly identify where the window of opportunity is at its time and push the appropriate policies at the time, because are the ones that are feasible to be pushed. What a crisis provides, it provides, and I think in the Spanish case and the European case without questioning, a window of opportunity to pursue policies that at certain periods of time were very, very difficult to actually be able to implement. So I think in this sense, you know, the window of opportunity that the crisis offers, it's very, very important. I think it's a process that you have to take advantage of. You have to be ready for that. And that brings me to the third crucial point, which Alan Krueger highlighted very well, which is the importance of analysis, of good economic policy analysis. This is very important, and I fully agree with some of the comments that he said, that when you're an academic, you don't realize, or you tend to think that really academics are the ones that pay attention to detail. In fact, actually, academics are very good at simplifying and not paying attention to detail. You know, so it's really the devil is in the details. In policymaking, there are a lot of little details that need to be, make sure that you can be able to work through to get the process through the event, but nevertheless, you need to have the right economic policy down, and you need to have it down ex ante. You need to have it down ex ante so that when the window of opportunity comes, you're ready to try to be able to push the right policies. And this is one thing that's very important, and that has to come from economic policy analysis. Now, it's difficult in some ways to identify specific growth areas. That's certainly something that entrepreneurs and business people are better designed to do, but we do know there are three things that we should be pushing for that will take us in the right direction. Those are building human capital in a more competitive environment and in a highly internationalized economy. Those are three crucial things that we need to make our economy be able to promote, and that's the essence of what the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics is building human capital with a highly global competitive approach to it in a very internationalized industry, and clearly with a highly international goal and strategy. And I think that's clearly the future for our economy. Unfortunately, I don't think that the Graduate School of Economics is the exception. I tend to think that it's more the rule rather than the exception, although many people tend to think it may be the exception. But anyway, I congratulate you for that, and I really thank you for the work that you're doing and for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all those who had contributed to the success of the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics. I fully support what José Manuel Campa said. We must invest in education and training, which in my mind is the same as investing in the future. This is one of the most important reasons why all of us from this side of the room, and all of you, I'm sure, we pay attention and we encourage you to make the best of your time at the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics. We need your intelligence, we need your imagination, we need your effort as students, as members of this academic community to improve the way the future will be better and our sons will live in a better world. Thank you very, very much.